The high desert air was so still, the scream tore it in two. It was her own. J.C. Monroe stood at the shattered wooden rail of the corral, her breath catching like a snagged thread. The post was splintered, the gate swinging on one hinge, and the dust inside was empty. He was gone. Apollo, her prize stallion, the last living legacy of her father, was gone. She fell to her knees, her eyes tracking the churned earth. Not the wide, chaotic tracks of multiple rustlers. It was one horse, led by one man, and his tracks, pressed deep and clear in the Arizona dirt, were not made by a boot. They were made by moccasins. The Circle M ranch was all J.C. Monroe had left. It was a harsh, unforgiving stretch of land in Redemption County, Arizona, clinging to the edge of the territory. It was hers, bought with her father, Angus Monroe's, last breath and all his savings. But since his passing 6 months prior, it had become a target. Every gust of wind felt like it was trying to pry her fingers from the deed. And now, Apollo was gone. He wasn't just a horse, he was her future. The breeding fees from that stallion were the only thing keeping the bank in San Angelo from foreclosing. Without him, she was just a woman alone on too much land, an easy meal for the vultures. Her foreman, a grizzled old-timer named Pete, spat tobacco juice into the dust. It's Apache tracks, Jay, clear as day. One man, moving fast, headed straight for the mountains. One man? Jay's mind raced. It didn't make sense. A lone raider? We have to go after him. Pete shook his head, his face a roadmap of regret. I can't track that man in those mountains, child. Not anymore. He'll be gone before we even clear the ridge, and my eyes ain't what they was. Frustration and fear burned in her throat. There was only one other option. She saddled her mare, Bess, ignoring Pete's protests, and rode the 10 miles to the dusty collection of buildings that passed for a town. Sheriff Brody's office smelled of stale whiskey and apathy. He was a large man, his silver star pinned to a food-stained vest, and he was already shaking his head before she finished her sentence. Apache, you say? Brody leaned back, his chair groaning in protest. Well, Miss Monroe, that's an army matter, not a county one. Besides, what am I going to do? Ride onto the reservation and ask for him back? It's just a horse. It's not just a horse, Sheriff. It's my livelihood. JC's voice cracked. It's the only thing keeping Barrett Coleman from owning my ranch. At the mention of Coleman, the sheriff's eyes went flat. Barrett Coleman owned the bank, the saloon, and half the county. His Triple C ranch bordered hers and had been slowly strangling the Circle M for years, diverting water and buying up her debts. Now, Jay, Brody said, his tone falsely paternal, Mr. Coleman is a businessman. He's made you a fair offer. Maybe it's time to accept it. This land is no place for a woman alone. You work for him, don't you? She whispered, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. I keep the peace, Brody snapped, his face reddening. And a lone Apache is not my concern. Go home, JC, before you get real trouble. Jay stormed out, the hollow slam of the office door echoing her own hollowed-out hope. She rode back to the Circle M defeated. The sun bled out of the sky, painting the desert in hues of blood and bruised purple. She would lose it all. Coleman had won. She sat on her porch, her father's Winchester rifle across her lap, watching the light fade. She didn't bother to light a lamp. That night, a vicious storm rolled in, the kind of desert squall that turned the world to mud and noise. The thunder was so loud she almost missed the sound. A soft, insistent knock on her front door. Pete was in the bunkhouse. She was alone. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She grabbed the Winchester, her knuckles white. "Who's there?" she yelled over the wind. The door creaked open a few inches. A voice, low and rough as sandpaper, cut through the rain. "Miss Monroe, I have your horse." She peered through the crack. In the jagged flash of lightning, she saw him. He was tall, drenched to the bone, with rain sluicing off the brim of a worn hat. Behind him, tied to the porch rail, was Apollo, nervous but unharmed. The man himself was terrifying. He was clearly native, his heritage etched into his high cheekbones and stark, dark eyes. A long, puckered scar ran from his left temple across his cheek and disappeared into his collar. He looked less like a man and more like a human battlefield. She leveled the rifle at his chest. "Step back. How did you get him?" He raised his hands slowly, showing they were empty. "The man who took him. I know him. He's careless. Who are you?" "My name is Micah," he said. The wind howled, whipping his long, dark hair across his scarred face. "I brought him back. Now I'm here to ask for payment." JC's finger tightened on the trigger. "Payment? I have money. Not much, but you've earned it." Micah shook his head, the movement slow and deliberate. Rain dripped from his chin. "I don't want your money, Miss Monroe. Food, then? A fresh horse? You can take your pick of the stable, just not him." She nodded toward Apollo, who whinnied softly, recognizing his home. "I don't want your horses either," Micah said. His stillness was more unnerving than any threat. The storm raged around them, but he seemed to be the eye of it. "The man who stole your stallion, he didn't do it for himself." A cold dread, deeper than the rain, settled over her. "What do you mean?" "He's a white man. Name's Mitch. Rides with a CCC brand." The breath left JC's lungs. Mitch. A cruel, rat-faced man who was always at Barrett Coleman's side. It wasn't a random raid. It was Coleman. He was trying to break her. He'd sent one of his own men, disguised with moccasins, to steal her future and blame the Apache. "How do you know this?" she demanded. "I've been tracking Mitch for a long time," Micah said, his voice dropping. "He's predictable. He gets sloppy when he thinks no one is watching. I found him at a way station, bragging about how his boss was finally going to get the Circle M." It all clicked into place. Sheriff Brody's disinterest. Coleman's fair offer. This was a siege, and she hadn't even seen the enemy. "So you brought him back," she said, lowering the rifle just an inch. "Why?" "To hurt Coleman." "That," Micah agreed, "and to stop him. He won't quit, Miss Monroe. Stealing the horse was just the first move. When that doesn't work, he'll try something else. He'll poison your well, or burn your hay, or he'll come for you." The last two words hit her like a physical blow. She was alone. Pete was loyal, but old. Brody was bought. She was completely, utterly vulnerable. "What is it you want, Micah?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He met her gaze. His eyes were dark, but there was an intensity in them, a fire that hadn't been put out by whatever had scarred him. "I returned your horse. It's the most valuable thing you have." "Yes. I am asking for an exchange." He took a step closer, and she flinched, raising the rifle again. He stopped. "I am asking," he said, "to guard your heart." JC stared at him, baffled and outraged. "Guard my heart? What in God's name is that supposed to mean? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "It's not a joke," he said, his face grim. "Your heart is your ranch. It's your father's legacy. It's the fight in you. Coleman isn't just trying to take your land. He's trying to take your will, your heart. I am asking you to let me stay. Let me be your guard. Let me be the man who stands between you and him." "You want a job?" she said, confused. "You went through all this to get a job as a ranch hand?" "I want no wages," he said firmly. "I want no bed in your house. I want nothing from you accept your permission to be here. I'll sleep in the barn. I'll work your fences. And when Coleman's men come, I'll be the one they meet first. In exchange, I get a chance to face the men I'm hunting. We want the same thing, Miss Munro, to see Barrett Coleman fall." She looked from the strange, scarred man to her horse, and back again. He was half Apache, a drifter, a man clearly haunted by violence. Hiring him was madness. It would make her a pariah. Coleman would use it against her. But what choice did she have? Coleman had already declared war. Brodie wouldn't help. This man, Micah. He'd returned her horse when he could have sold it. He'd brought her the truth when no one else would. He was offering himself as a shield. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "Because I'm the only one telling you the truth," he said. "And because you have no one else." He was right. The cold, bitter truth of it. "The barn," she said, finally lowering the Winchester. "There's a cot in the tack room. You can take your meals with Pete. But you answer to me. And if I see you look at my property, or my horses, or me the wrong way, I won't hesitate. Do you understand?" Micah nodded once, a sharp, definitive movement. "I understand." "Get him out of the rain," she said, gesturing to Apollo. She stepped back inside her house, sliding the heavy bolt across the door. She leaned against it, her entire body shaking, and listened as the sounds of the storm were joined by the hoofbeats of her stallion being led safely into the barn. She had just made a deal with a devil, she thought. Or perhaps, she prayed, with the only angel she was likely to get. The next morning, the high desert was washed clean. The Circle M looked deceptively peaceful, the air crisp and new. But nothing was the same. When JC went to the barn, Micah was already awake. He had stripped a stall, reshod Apollo, and was mending a section of harness rigging with a skill that surprised her. He moved with a quiet, unsettling grace. Pete, however, was not impressed. The old foreman cornered Jay by the water trough. "Jay, what is this?" he hissed, jerking his chin toward the barn. "You hired an Apache? After what happened? Do you know what Coleman will say? What the town will say?" "Coleman sent the man who stole Apollo," Jay shot back, her voice low and fierce. "Mitch! He disguised it as a raid. Micah brought him back. He's the only reason we're not ruined today. He stays, Pete. That's final." Pete stared at her, his jaw working, but he saw the iron in her eyes. He'd seen it in her father. He nodded curtly. "All right, but I'm watching him. Every second." The truce was set, but the tension on the ranch was thick enough to cut. Jay watched Micah. He worked tirelessly from sunup to sundown. He mended fences in the high pastures, his silhouette a lonely figure against the vast, empty sky. He spoke only when spoken to, answering in clipped, precise sentences. He never ate with her or Pete, preferring to take his plate back to the barn. He was a ghost, a battle-scarred shadow, as the title implied. But his presence changed the atmosphere of the Circle M. JC found herself sleeping through the night for the first time in months. The ranch felt safer, guarded. A week later, the expected visit came. Barrett Coleman rode up to the house, flanked by Mitch and 3 other riders. Coleman was a handsome man in his 40s, with cold blue eyes and a politician's smile. He dismounted, sweeping his hat off his head, as JC stepped onto the porch. "Miss Munro, a pleasure, as always." He let his eyes roam over her, a little too familiarly. "I was so distressed to hear of your recent troubles. A horse theft, I believe, Sheriff Brodie told me." "Tragic. I got him back," JC said, her arms crossed. Her hand was near the Colt revolver she now wore on her hip. Coleman's smile tightened just a fraction. "Indeed? Remarkable. These things usually don't end so well." His gaze drifted past her, towards the barn, where Micah had just emerged, carrying a saddle. Coleman's face darkened instantly. The mask of the charming neighbor fell away, revealing the predator beneath. "What is that doing on your property?" Mitch beside him put his hand on his gun. "That's him," he whispered to Coleman. "That's the half-breed that jumped me." "Miss Monroe," Coleman said, his voice dangerously soft. "Are you harboring a reservation jumper? A fugitive?" "He works for me," JC said, her voice shaking only slightly. "He's a free man." "He's a savage," Coleman spat. "And I want him off this land. He's a threat to my cattle." "To you." Micah walked toward them, moving with that same silent, deliberate pace. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, placing himself between JC and Coleman. He didn't look at Coleman. He looked at Mitch. "You drop this," Micah said. He tossed something small and metal into the dust at Mitch's feet. It was a triple C concho, one that had come off Mitch's saddlebag when Micah had overtaken him. Mitch's face went white. Coleman saw it. He knew he was caught. "You're making a mistake, girl," Coleman snarled. "A terrible, terrible mistake. You'll be begging me to buy this land from you by the end of the month." "Get off my property, Mr. Coleman," JC said. Coleman stared her down, then looked at Micah. "You," he said, his voice full of venom. "I don't know who you are, but you'll be dead before the week is out." Micah just watched him, his scarred face impassive. "You first." The threat was so blunt, so final, it stunned everyone into silence. Coleman, enraged, mounted his horse. "You'll regret this," he shouted, and his posse rode off in a cloud of dust. Jay's legs gave out, and she sank onto the porch swing. Pete came running from the side of the house, his own rifle in hand. "You all right, Jay?" She nodded, breathless. She looked at Micah. He was still watching the dust cloud of the retreating riders. "He meant it," she said. "I know," Micah replied. "He'll be back. He'll kill you." Micah finally turned to look at her. His dark eyes held a sorrow so deep it was bottomless. "He can try," he said. "He's been trying for a very long time." The Circle M became an armed camp. Pete took to patrolling the northern border, and Micah the southern, the one that bordered Coleman's land. The work of the ranch continued, but under a constant, crushing weight of anticipation. Jay found herself seeking Micah out, not for conversation, but just to be near his quiet strength. She brought him coffee in the mornings and a blanket on cold nights. He would just nod, his eyes always on the horizon. The wall between them was high, built of her fear and his silence. One evening, she found him in the barn, shirtless, tending to a long, fresh gash on his forearm. "My God!" she gasped, rushing forward with a rag and the whiskey she kept for medicinal purposes. "What happened?" "A fence wire," he said, too quickly. "That's a bullet graze, Micah, don't lie to me." She soaked the rag with whiskey and pressed it to the wound. He hissed, the muscles in his back and shoulders tensing, but he didn't pull away. His back was a landscape of old scars, white and silver against his tanned skin, bullet holes, knife wounds, and a brutal, webbed scar from an old burn. She had seen his face, but this was the story of a man who had survived a war. "Who are you?" she whispered, her hands gentle as she cleaned the new wound. "What did Coleman mean? Why has he been trying to kill you?" Micah was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the horses shifting in their stalls. "My name is Micah," he began, his voice low. "My mother was an Irish immigrant. My father was Chiricahua Apache. I never fit anywhere. Too white for the people, too red for the town." He turned to face her. The lantern light played over his scarred cheek. "I was young and angry. I could ride, and I could shoot. Coleman, he found me. He gave me a place. I rode for the Triple C. Jay's stomach twisted. You worked for him? For 3 years, Micah said, his eyes filled with self-loathing. I didn't know what he was at first. I just drove cattle. But then the night rides started. We weren't driving cattle. We were running guns, whiskey, selling Winchester rifles to renegade factions, then leading the army to them and collecting the bounty. Coleman played both sides. He got rich on blood. He paused, taking a ragged breath. I wanted out. I'd met a woman, an Apache woman from a peaceful band. Her name was Leon. We had a son. Jay's hand flew to her mouth. I told Coleman I was done. He smiled, shook my hand, and wished me well. 2 days later, I went to trade for supplies. When I came back, his voice broke. He choked on the words. He sent Mitch and his crew. They said it was a renegade camp. They said they were attacked, but they killed them all. The women, the children. They burned the camp. He pointed to the scar on his face. I found them. Leon and my boy. I found Mitch. I tried to kill him. His men captured me. They held me down and put a branding iron to my face, so I'd always be marked as a savage. They left me for dead. Jay was weeping silently, tears tracking through the dust on her own cheeks. I've been hunting them ever since, Micah finished, his voice dead. Mitch, and the man who gave the order, Barrett Coleman. I tracked Mitch for months. He led me here, to your ranch. I heard him bragging about how Coleman was going to use this ranch, how he was going to break the stubborn woman who owned it. He looked at her, his dark eyes burning with a terrifying mix of grief and rage. When I came here, he said, when I offered to guard your heart, it wasn't for you. It was for them. He tapped his own chest. My wife, my son. I'm not here protecting you, JC. I'm here using you as bait. I knew Coleman couldn't resist. I knew he'd come, and when he did, I would be waiting. The confession hung in the air, brutal and cold. Jay felt a wave of sickness. He wasn't her protector. He was an executioner, and she was the lure. Get out, she whispered. What? Get out, she screamed, shoving him. You used me. You put my life, Pete's life, in danger, all for your revenge. You're no better than he is. JC, wait. Go. Get off my land. I don't want your help. I don't want your war. She ran from the barn, collapsing on the porch, her body racked with sobs. She had trusted him. She had started to feel something for him. And it was all a lie. She cried for an hour until she was empty. She heard a horse approaching and looked up, her eyes red, expecting to see Micah leaving. It wasn't Micah. It was Sheriff Brody. And behind him was a posse of 20 men, all of them wearing Triple C armbands. Barrett Coleman and Mitch were right at the front. JC Monroe, Brody yelled, his voice carrying the false weight of the law. You are under arrest for harboring a known fugitive and murderer. Hand over the Apache, Micah, or we will burn this ranch to the ground with you in it. JC's blood ran cold. This was it. The end game. Micah's bait had worked, and she was the one caught in the trap. The barn door opened. Micah walked out, his rifle in his hand. He hadn't left. He moved to the porch, his eyes not on Brody, but on Coleman. She's done nothing, Micah called out. This is between you and me, Barrett. It's between me and my property, boy, Coleman shouted back, his face purple with rage. And everything I see is mine. You have 1 minute to come out, or we open fire. Pete! Jay screamed, diving back into the house. To the windows! Pete, who had seen the posse arrive, was already there, his own rifle ready. It's a slaughter, Jay. There's too many of them. Get in here! Jay yelled at Micah. Micah gave one last look at Coleman, then backed into the house. He barred the heavy oak door. "To the second floor," he ordered. "The angle is better. Pete, watch the back. They'll send men around." The next few seconds stretched into an agonizing silence. Then, Coleman's voice. "Fire!" The world exploded. Bullets splintered the porch rails and shattered the windows. Glass sprayed across the room. JC, Micah, and Pete returned fire, the ranch house filling with acrid smoke. "They're trying to pin us down!" Micah yelled over the din. He fired, and one of Coleman's men cried out and fell from his saddle. "They're going to send Mitch and a few others to the barn to set the fire." "No!" Jay cried. "Apollo, we have to hold the house," Micah said, reloading. "The house is the only thing we can defend." They were trapped. The gunfire was relentless. Coleman's men were using wagons as cover, slowly advancing. It was only a matter of time. "We can't win this," Pete said, his face pale. "They'll just wait us out or burn us." JC looked at Micah. He was firing with a calm, deadly precision, but his face was a mask of despair. This wasn't the revenge he'd planned. He'd wanted a confrontation, not a siege that would get her killed. "You said you were using me as bait," Jay said, her voice hard as she reloaded her own Winchester. Micah flinched. "Jay, Well, it worked, but you're not just an executioner, Micah. You're a guardian. You said so yourself, so guard us. Get us out of this." His eyes met hers. The guilt and the grief were warring with a desperate, protective instinct. "There's no way out," he said. "Yes, there is," Jay said, her mind racing. She thought of her father, of the stories he told. My father. He was digging a new well, east of the house. He hit bedrock. He bought dynamite, a whole case of it, from the Red Dog mining supply. Micah's head snapped up. "Where is it?" "It's not here. It's in the old mine shaft. The one on the ridge, overlooking the pass. He stored it there to keep it dry." A new, terrible, brilliant plan began to form in Micah's eyes. "The pass," he whispered. "The only road back to town." "What are you thinking?" "They're focused on the house," Micah said. "The cellar. Is there a crawl space?" "Yes," Jay said. "It leads out to the old root cellar, 50 yards from the house." "Pete," Micah said, "can you give us 5 minutes of hell? Make them think we're all still here. Fire from every window you can." Pete nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Give 'em hell, son. It'll be a pleasure." Micah grabbed Jay's arm. "Come on. We're not just going to survive this, JC. We're going to end it." The trapdoor to the root cellar slammed shut above them, plunging them into a world of damp earth and absolute darkness. The silence was immediate and terrifying. Above them, the gun battle, which had been a deafening roar of splintering wood and chaotic shouting, was suddenly muffled. It became a ghostly, percussive thump, 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 the sound of a giant, angry heart beating against the ceiling of their earthen tomb. JC's breath hitched. She could smell the cold, mineral scent of potatoes and soil. "Pete," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's giving us our chance." Micah's voice came, low and steady beside her in the blackness. "Don't waste it. Follow me. Keep a hand on my belt." She fumbled, her fingers finding the worn leather. He was her anchor. They moved in a blind shuffle, their hands and knees scraping on the packed dirt. It felt like an eternity, crawling toward an exit only he seemed certain of. Every burst of gunfire from above sent a small vibration through the ground, a reminder of the sacrifice Pete was making with every bullet he fired. He was alone, drawing the fire of 20 men, making them believe their quarry was still cornered. Micah pushed open a low, rotting wooden door, and they spilled out into the night air. They were behind a cluster of thick boulders and overgrown mesquite. 50 yards from the house. The ranch house itself was a terrible sight, winking with the orange flashes of gunfire, smoke pouring from its shattered windows. "The stable," Micah whispered, his eyes already scanning the perimeter. "We need horses, but we can't let them see us." "We don't have to," Jay said, her own land-born instincts taking over. She pointed not toward the open yard, but toward the gully that ran behind the house. "My father's old hunting path. It goes through the creek bed. It's dry this time of year. It comes out right behind the stable." He nodded, a look of grim approval. "Lead the way." They ran, staying low, their lungs burning. The dry, rocky bed of the creek protected them, shielding them from view. The sounds of the siege grew louder again, a brutal backdrop to their desperate flight. The stable was dark, but the horses were frantic, kicking the stall doors and whinnying in terror, smelling the gunpowder. Micah put a hand on the stable door. "Wait." He listened, his head tilted. He was a predator, sensing other predators. One man. On the far side, watching the back of the house. "How do we—" Micah picked up a rock. With a soft, underarm motion, he tossed it into a pile of old metal tack 20 yards away. The clatter was sharp in the night. The Triple C man cursed. "Who's there?" he yelled, and they heard his boots move away from the stable, toward the noise. "Now," Micah whispered. They slipped inside. The familiar smell of hay and horsehide was thick with the animal's fear. Micah moved not to Apollo, but to 2 cow ponies, fast and sure-footed. He didn't speak to them in words, but in low, soft sounds, a language of pure, calming intent. The horses, trembling, settled under his hands. He and Jay saddled them with a blinding, practiced speed, their hands working in tandem in the gloom. They led them out the back, into the cover of the arroyo. As Jay swung into the saddle, she paused, her gaze fixed on the ranch house. Pete's firing was becoming sporadic, slower. "Pete," she whispered, her heart aching. "We can't just leave him." Micah stopped, his hand on her horse's rein. He looked back at the house, his face a mask of granite in the moonlight. "He made his choice, JC. He's an old warrior. He knew the cost. He's buying our time, buying your future. We have to make it count. We ride." His words were hard, but true. She tore her eyes away from her home and nodded. "We ride." They rode hard, not toward the fight, but away from it, circling wide around the battle. They climbed the rocky, familiar switchbacks, Micah following her lead as she navigated the paths her father had taught her. The moon was high, painting the desert in stark silver and black, making the landscape look alien and beautiful. They found the shaft, a dark mouth in the side of the hill. Just inside, as she'd promised, was the wooden crate, its stenciled letters stark. "Danger, dynamite." "How much?" Jay asked, her voice echoing in the small space. "All of it," Micah said. He worked with a chilling expertise. This was a dark skill, born from his shadowed past. He didn't just grab the sticks, he inspected each one, bundled them, and moved with a focused, grim efficiency. He led her to the narrowest part of the pass, a bottleneck of sheer rock walls. "Hold this," he ordered, handing her a lantern. He moved like a spider, climbing into the crevices, placing the charges with a precise, destructive artistry. He was planting a seed of terrible, instant karma. Jay watched him, her fear mixing with a strange awe. He was a man of total contradictions. The gentle hands that calmed the horses were the same hands now wiring an entire mountain to explode. "We need a tripwire," he said, climbing down, his hands dusty. "Something they won't see." "My father's fishing line," Jay said, her mind racing. She ran back to the supply box and pulled out a spool of thin, strong wire. He used it for mending anything. Said it was stronger than rawhide. Micah took it, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. Together, they strung the wire across the pass, ankle high, anchoring it to a loose rock. He connected the nearly invisible line to the detonator plunger, which he hid behind a boulder. "It's done," he said. They stood in the silence of the high desert, the sounds of the distant battle echoing faintly up the valley. The trap was set. They were pressed together in the dark, the shared danger and adrenaline acting like a current between them. Now that the work was finished, the silence was filled with everything unspoken. "You lied to me," Jay said. It wasn't an accusation, but a statement. Her voice was flat. Micah didn't turn. He kept watching the valley. "Yes. You came here for revenge. You used me. You said you were guarding your heart, your family's memory. You put me and Pete in the middle of your war." "I did," he said, his voice low and rough. "Revenge is a cold fire, Jay. It's all I've had for 5 years. It keeps you moving. It keeps you breathing. But it doesn't. It's not life. It's just a different kind of death." He finally turned to face her. The moonlight was cruel, catching the silver of his scar, but his eyes were filled with a profound, agonizing honesty. "When I saw him ride up," Micah said, "when he threatened you, when he looked at you with those same dead eyes, it wasn't revenge I felt, it was rage. But it wasn't for my past, it was for your future, for what he was trying to do to you, to this place, to someone good." He reached out, his hand hesitating, as if unsure of his right to touch her. Then his calloused fingers brushed her cheek. His touch was rough, but it was the gentlest thing she had ever felt. "I am still guarding a heart, JC," he said, his voice thick. "But it's not theirs anymore, and it's not mine." He looked directly into her eyes, and she saw his entire, broken, war-torn soul. "It's yours. I meant what I said, just not how I said it. Your heart is safe with me. I swear it. On my family's graves, and on my own life." Before she could think, before she could doubt, before the world could rush back in, she leaned in and kissed him. It was a desperate, frantic kiss, tasting of gunpowder and dust and a terrible, aching need. It was forgiveness for the lie. It was acceptance of his vow. It was two broken people. In the shadow of a mountain, they had turned into a bomb, clinging to the only solid thing in their world. It was a kiss that sealed their alliance, not in vengeance, but in survival. He broke away first, his breath ragged. He rested his forehead against hers for 1 second, a moment of pure, shared peace. Then the warrior returned. "We have to go back," he said, his voice hard again. "Pete can't hold them forever." Jay nodded, wiping a tear from her eye with a dusty hand. "What's the plan? We go back to the ridge? Wait for them?" Micah shook his head. A new, dangerous light gleamed in his eyes. He was no longer just a hunter waiting in ambush. He was a guardian. "No, we don't go back to the house. We don't hide." He picked up his rifle, his face set. "We do exactly what he doesn't expect. We go to him." They rode down from the high pass, not in a frantic gallop, but with the cold, deliberate pace of an avalanche about to be set loose. The kiss, tasting of dynamite and desperation, still lingered on JC's lips. It had changed everything. The silence between them was no longer a wall. It was a forged bond, humming with shared purpose. Micah's 5-year hunt for vengeance and her desperate fight for survival had merged into a single, sharp point. As they cleared the last line of rocks, the scene at the ranch house came into full view. The gunfire had sputtered, dying to an occasional defiant crack from Pete. Coleman's men, bored and arrogant, were clustered around his command wagon, their backs to the dark ridge. The sudden sound of their 2 horses trotting into the open made the Triple C men jump. A dozen rifles were leveled in an instant. "Hold your fire!" Barrett Coleman bellowed. His voice, which had always been so smooth, was raw with frustration. He stepped out from behind the wagon, his face illuminated by a half-dozen lanterns. When he saw who it was, his frustration melted into a look of supreme, predatory triumph. He looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe his good fortune. "Well, well," he sneered, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent clearing. "The rat comes out of its hole, and he brings the little mouse with him." He stalked toward them, his men fanning out on either side, creating an inescapable semicircle of guns. Sheriff Brody waddled up beside him, his face sweaty with relief. "See, Barrett, I told you. They had nowhere to go." Mitch, his rat-like face twisted in a hateful grin, stayed close to his boss. "It's over, Bandage Breed. Your friend in the house is almost out of ammunition. You're surrounded. Give up." Micah brought his horse to a halt. His eyes were not on Mitch or the posse. They were locked on Barrett Coleman. He swung down from his saddle, moving with a fluid, lethal calm. Jay dismounted beside him, her heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat. This was Micah's moment, but she had to set the stage. She had to buy the last, final seconds. "We're not here to give up, Mr. Coleman," JC called out, her voice surprisingly clear and strong. She stepped forward, deliberately placing herself slightly in front of Micah. "We're here to offer a deal." Coleman laughed, a short, ugly bark. "A deal? Child, you are in no position to be offering me anything but your surrender." "I'll sell you the land," JC said. The words hit the air and hung there. Micah shot her a look, not of betrayal, but of sharp, sudden understanding. He saw the play. He saw her strength. Coleman's arrogance faltered, replaced by confusion. "What? You heard me," Jay said, forcing a tremor into her voice, playing the part of the broken woman. "I'll sign the deed, tonight. But not the river access. I keep the water rights, and you let Micah and Pete go free. You call off your men. You win. Just let us leave with our lives." Coleman's smile returned, wider and more terrible than before. He had her. He had broken her. He had won. He stepped so close she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Oh, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice a grotesque parody of charm. "You're in no position to bargain. You don't get to keep anything. I'll take the land. I'll take the river. I'll take that stallion of yours." He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her. "And then I'll decide what to do with you." He turned his head and spat into the dust. As for him, he jerked his chin at Micah. "I'll take his life, right here." "You'll take nothing," Micah said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the night like a honed blade. "Because your tame sheriff here is about to be arrested." Brody blustered, his hand going to his gun. "Arrested? For what?" "For aiding and abetting a gun runner and a mass murderer," said a new voice, deep and resonant, from the darkness. Coleman's head snapped up. From the darkness on the other side of the pass, the main road from Fort Grant, a new group of riders emerged. They moved not as a posse, but as a troop. They weren't Triple C men. They wore the dark blue, buttoned-up uniforms of the U.S. Army, and at their head was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a U.S. Marshal badge pinned to his chest, and beside him, his face grim but triumphant, was Pete. "Barrett Coleman," the Marshal said, his voice booming as his men efficiently fanned out, their rifles aimed not at Jay, but at Coleman's posse. "You are under arrest. I am Marshal Gideon, and I've been tracking your illegal arms and whiskey operation for 6 months. Coleman's face went slack, the blood draining from it. His eyes darted from the marshal to Pete, to Micah, his mind processing the trap. This is a trick, Pete grinned, his old face etched with satisfaction. While you two were up on the ridge playing with dynamite, I slipped out the back. They were all so focused on the front, they didn't see an old man crawl out a cellar window. Rode like hell to Fort Grant. Seems this Marshal Gideon was already there, asking questions about our friend Mr. Coleman. He was very interested in my story. You have no proof, Coleman roared, his composure shattering. No one talks. No one will testify. We have a witness, Gideon said, nodding to Micah. And we have him. He pointed directly at Mitch. This was the moment, the final piece of karma. Mitch, seeing the soldiers, the marshal, and his boss's trapped, furious face, did what all cowards do. He tried to save himself. It was him! Mitch shrieked, his voice cracking as he pointed a shaking finger at Coleman. It was all him! He made me do it. The guns, the whiskey, all of it. He ordered the massacre at the encampment. He told us to kill 'em all, that dead Apaches don't talk. He said it was just good business. The confession, so raw and public, was the final nail. Coleman, his political smile gone forever, replaced by the face of a cornered wolf, let out a sound of pure, animalistic fury. With a speed that defied his civilized appearance, he drew his Colt revolver. But he didn't aim at the marshal. He didn't aim at Micah. He aimed at the man who betrayed him. Traitor! He screamed. The world exploded. Coleman fired at Mitch. Mitch, clutching his gut, fired back wildly. The marshal's men returned fire. Sheriff Brody, screaming, threw his gun down and his hands in the air. It was chaos. JC instinctively ducked as a bullet sang past her ear. One of Coleman's men, still loyal, took aim at her. Jay! Micah roared. He shoved her, hard, pushing her behind a horse as he brought his own rifle up. A shot cracked, simultaneous with Micah's. The C man fell. Micah grunted, a sharp intake of breath, and staggered. Micah! She screamed. I'm all right, he bit out, but she saw him press a hand to his side, his face pale in the moonlight. He'd been hit. The melee was over in seconds. Coleman's paid men had no fight in them against US soldiers. They threw down their guns, hands high. Mitch was on the ground, choking on his own blood. But Coleman was a shadow. While his men surrendered, he had seen his own desperate chance. He vaulted onto his horse, dug his spurs in, and wheeled the animal around, not toward the marshal, not toward the road, but toward the one place he thought was empty. He galloped, low over the horse's neck, straight into the dark, narrow mouth of the second pass, the escape route Jay and Micah had so conveniently left open. No! Jay screamed, scrambling to her feet. He's getting away! Micah, clutching his bleeding side, raised his rifle, but Coleman was already too far, a dark shape swallowed by the canyon's shadows. No, he's not, Micah said, his voice grim. They heard it, faint but clear, the high-pitched twang of the fishing line as it snagged the horse's galloping legs, a small sound, almost lost in the echo of the gunfire. Then, a sharp click from the detonator. Barrett Coleman reined in his horse, a sudden instinctual panic seizing him. He looked down. He saw the thin, silver wire wrapped around his horse's forelegs. He looked up, his face a mask of sudden, terrible understanding, just as Micah and Jay watched from the valley floor. There was no sound at first, just a brilliant, blinding flash of white light high up in the pass that illuminated the canyon walls like a snapshot from hell. Then the sound hit them. It was not a crack. It was a ground-shaking crump that echoed like the wrath of God. The entire side of the mountain, loosened by Micah's expert placement of the charges, seemed to liquefy. A river of rock, boulders, and earth thundered down into the pass. The roar went on for almost a minute, a deafening cascade of finality. When it stopped, silence fell, absolute and complete. The pass was gone, buried under 100 tons of rock. Barrett Coleman and his escape route were erased. The karma of the land he had tried to steal with blood had, in the end, become his tomb. The dust cloud began to drift up, looking like a ghostly hand against the night sky. Marshal Gideon, his face awestruck, lowered his rifle and turned to JC. "Good Lord, remind me not to get on your bad side, Miss Monroe." The adrenaline left all at once. JC turned to Micah, her relief short-lived. He was slumping, his hand now dark and slick with blood. "Micah!" She rushed to him, catching him as he listed to the side. Just a scratch," he breathed, but his weight was heavy on her. "Pete, help me!" she yelled. "Get him inside! He's shot!" The battle was over. The war was won. But the fight for the Guardian had just begun. 2 days later, the Circle M was quiet. The broken windows were boarded up, letting in stripes of muted afternoon light. The air smelled of fresh sawn wood and strong coffee, not gunpowder. Marshal Gideon and his men were gone, taking Sheriff Brodie and the remnants of Coleman's crew in chains. Micah's testimony, combined with the detailed CCC ledger Pete had found in Coleman's office, had sealed the case. The marshal's report would list Barrett Coleman as deceased, lost in a mining accident. Jay sat in a chair by the bed in her spare room. Micah was sleeping. The doctor from Fort Grant had come, dug the bullet from his side, and stitched him up. He'd lost blood, and the wound was deep, but it had missed anything vital. "He's tough," the doctor had said, admiring his own handiwork, "but he's going to need to stay put. And you, Mum, seem more than capable of ensuring that." Jay had. She hadn't left his side. She watched the rise and fall of his chest. His face, in sleep, was younger. The scar seemed less a mark of violence and more a map of survival. He had come here to finish his war, and he had. He had avenged his family. His eyes flickered open, finding hers immediately, as if he'd known she was there. "Jay," he rasped, his voice rough. "I'm here," she said, her voice soft. She moved to the edge of the bed, taking his hand. It was warm. "You're safe." He tried to sit up and winced. "The ranch?" "It's safe too," she said, gently pushing him back against the pillows. "Pete's hiring on 2 new hands tomorrow. Good ones, vouched for by the marshal, the bank in San Angelo. When they heard what Coleman did, they extended my note. They called me a pillar of the community." A small, weary smile touched her lips. "I think they're scared of me." Micah nodded, relaxing. He looked at their joined hands. The silence stretched, but it was comfortable. I should leave," he said, his voice quiet. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Soon as I can ride. My fight is done here. I'll be a problem for you. A half Apache with my history. It won't be easy for you in town." JC's grip tightened. "You're a fool, Micah," she said, her voice fierce, but her eyes soft. "You think the town's going to mess with the woman who blew up a mountain? Or the man who's a registered hero with the US Army? You're not a problem. You're the ranch's best asset." A small smile finally touched his lips, transforming his scarred face. It was the first true smile she'd ever seen from him. "Is that what I am? An asset?" "You're more than that," she said. She reached out with her free hand, her fingers brushing the hair back from his forehead. "You're the man who kept his promise. You returned my horse, and you guarded my heart. Even when I told you to leave, even when you thought you were just here for revenge. I couldn't leave, Micah whispered, his thumb brushing her knuckles. When I was lying here, I realized. The revenge, it was just an anchor. It held me here. But it wasn't the harbor. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. He looked at her, his dark eyes clear of shadows for the first time. It's not my bait anymore, Jay. It's my home. He took a slow breath, his side aching. But the offer, it's still open. If you'll have me. I returned your stallion, but I asked to guard your heart in exchange. I meant it. For real, this time. Not as a job, not as a debt, but as my life. Jay Monroe looked at the battle-scarred man who had come out of the storm, the man who had seen the worst of the world, and still chose to protect what was good in it. She leaned down, closing the small distance between them, and kissed him. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the high pass. It was slow and deep and certain. It was always safe with you, she said against his lips. Welcome home. The Wild West was a place of brutal endings, but sometimes it was also a place of hard-won new beginnings. Jaycee and Micah, two people scarred by the world in different ways, found that the only way to survive was to trust each other. They faced down greed, corruption, and their own dark pasts to build a future together, proving that even in the harshest desert, love and loyalty can find a way to grow. Barrett Coleman learned his lesson in the cruelest way. The land you try to steal with blood will, in the end, demand blood from you. Thank you for watching this incredible story of survival and redemption. If their story of courage and hard karma moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a powerful story, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another real-life drama from our channel. We appreciate your support more than you know.